Okay, well, welcome everyone. I'm Rochelle Wilhite, designated broker of Best Choice Realty, and we're doing our Monday night webinar tonight. To continue on, we're going to talk tonight about building development and new construction. I'm going to have Virginia and Shannon help me with tonight's topic, but with as many people as we have on the call tonight, I'm hoping we could open up and actually share tonight maybe some things you've run into or questions that you have. So at any point in time, go ahead and throw up your hand or send a message in the chat to spur the conversation, because we can learn from each other. And when we have just this amount of people on the webinar tonight, I think we can actually pull some things from the group as well. So don't be shy tonight. Let's go ahead and open up the call if we could. Let's go to the next slide. So if you have not used InfoSparks or Fast Stats, there is a very, very quick, in fact, Shannon tested how quick it was. We could pull this little graph in just less than 5 minutes. It actually took us 2.5 minutes. We timed ourselves to figure out how is the new home sales going in all of the area of Northwest MLS. Any area where Northwest MLS services. We did a quick search on InfoSparks and was able to come up with this graph, which is quite fascinating. Since 2014, you can see the prices, the median sales price of new construction has definitely risen, and it's kind of leveled out when you look at what we're dealing with this month. It's kind of gone a little bit up and down, but very, very slightly. So if you're wanting to get more information about what new homes are doing in your specific area, all you would need to do if you were in the Northwest MLS is go to InfoSparks. Just make sure you toggle down and you use the residential versus the new construction versus a resale. It's just a quick button switch. You need to make that switch in order for it to display correctly. And then what you're looking at is anything that is newly built. And new construction does kind of dictate what we can be experiencing as far as the marketplace. If there's an oversupply of new construction, sometimes we see that affect the resale market as well. Or if there's an undersupply, if we're seeing multiple offers. That happened in 2007. There was an oversupply of a lot of homes in the Vegas area, and there were people waiting in line. In fact, it was the lottery, and you actually had to use like a little your entry into the model site was used as a lottery ticket, and then you would get, if you were picked, you would get to offer on those properties. And then, as you guys know, the ending of that story, market crashed and a lot of those people were upside down. So when you're looking at new construction, you look for areas in the MLS or the area where you're working where things are very stable, and it does appear that we are stable when it comes to new construction in our area. If I wanted to do this in Spokane, I may have to contact a good title company. They also track what they call housing starts, and they can give you some indications on whether this specific area or city has a good, amount of listings for the needs that, good supply and demand, where it's balanced, where it's solid, where they have construction, it's moving, but we don't have an oversupply, or we don't have multiple offers that's causing a lot of chaos in the marketplace. So we're looking for those types of areas when we're looking for people looking to buy new homes. There is there's an appetite for it. I don't know about you, but I've always wanted to own a new construction home, and I did purchase new construction, and I've built before. So we're going to kind of talk about the pros and cons. A lot of people that get into new construction or wanting to know, their clients are looking to you for advice on, what are best practices? What do I need to know? Should I buy a piece of land and develop it myself? Or should I buy a pre-sale? Or should I buy something that's already built, but it's mine? It's brand new. It has that new car or new home smell. That's a lot of times what people want. If you're running into problems with somebody who's going into a lot of resales and they're very, I would call them nitpicky or very particular people, most likely they're not looking for a resale. They're looking for something new. And new construction is where I would lead those people to. If they're not finding the floor plan, if they're not finding, exactly what they're looking for, then they may need to build. They may need to buy some land, sit on it, work with permits, but that process can take a long time. In King County, for example, it takes about a year or two just to get permits. So that could be a long, long path to put somebody through if they're truly wanting to get something that's newly built. It may be better to buy something that's maybe a pre-sale or a big builder, sit in it, obviously stable investment, then sell it in a few years and then build. So some people choose to go that route as well. Let's go to the next slide. So Shannon, you want to go over the vacant land? What kind of
Yeah,
forms they need?
so real quick, if you've got someone who's wanting to pick up land, develop it, that type of buyer that wants to do the custom home route. Um, one of the biggest things that a lot of agents kind of have as a pitfall is that they end up doing a lot more legwork than they really should. The burden of proof really falls on the clients in this scenario. When it comes to some of the legwork and who do I contact and where can I get a bid or a builder, or who can I contact the city? I'm going to go down to the city. The burden of that really does fall on the client. So try not to get too involved on some of the things that are really going to be the client's responsibility. But when it comes to the nitty gritty purchase and sale, it is different than a residential purchase and sale. You'll be using a Form 25 instead. There is a feasibility that's embedded in that. But if you're wanting to kind of have it be very clear, or if it's a big parcel, we're talking many, many acres, it might be beneficial to use the land and acreage addendum instead or in addition to.
That's 22 LA, right?
Yep, 22 LA. Pricing will be different on a land. In residential, we're talking about square footage mostly. On land, it's usable land, what's usable, what's not usable. You're dealing with a parcel size instead of an actual square footage of a piece of residence versus the parcel. So it's going to be a little bit different. It's going to be the price per square foot for the lot. Earnest money. What's interesting is we used to say 10 years ago, oh, when you're doing land, just do a promissory note, and that way there's no skin in the game necessarily for a buyer, but it's actually become more common for vacant land buyers to actually put an earnest money deposit receipt in place. So if you've been in the business a long time, you're probably in the habit of doing a promissory note. Of the files that we review, it's actually very rare to be seeing that these days. But again, it's not uncommon. People who do land a lot, it's not uncommon to see a promissory note from time to time.
And I think the reason they do the promissory note, Shannon, is because, excuse me, is because they're already spending money in doing feasibility, meaning
yeah,
hiring a guy to go out there and do a check. And that can be upwards of, I think the smallest feasibility study that I've seen was like $750. Somebody paid $750 to have their
yep,
client hire a feasibility study. And that's the cheapest one I found. Mostly it's like, depending on what they're having to check out, it can be a couple $1,000s. So essentially, without moving forward with the sale, they're putting up money that they're not going to get back. And that's the kind of I guess the tug of war that we have on, do we use the promissory note or do we actually just do a full feasibility study? And that's kind of, we could argue both sides, but I like
right.
how you had made the comment that more people are using earnest money, and they are. And so if you're in a situation of negotiation with a parcel of land and your client is really interested in it, it will show that they're more serious by putting up some earnest money in addition to doing a feasibility study rather than doing a promissory note.
Right.
So it's kind of a new trend that both Shannon and I noticed just a few months ago, actually. After the
Yeah.
pandemic, we've noticed a lot more uptick in that with
Yeah,
the
for
files we're
sure.
reviewing.
I mean, it's kind of just quick things real quick for vacant land, just for the sake of time. But when you've got land, because of feasibility, I mean, we're not having an inspector necessarily go out to the house like we would like an actual residential house. We're dealing with the parcel itself, getting the full title report, and as a listing agent, making sure you've run the full title and loading that on is just so helpful, because this is really part of what aids the feasibility is what's pulling up. Is there an easement? Do we have some sort of encroachment? Is there other claims to the property? I mean, this is really kind of what a buyer is going to want to take a full look at, see what's recorded against that property.
That's
But in
worth
terms of
money, Shannon. I mean, there's feasibility people that we're working off market with a potential buyer, going to the seller to negotiate a deal without a buyer's agent, that's the benefit of using a buyer's agent for vacant land, because you have access to the same information that a listing agent would have. And you can provide that to your client and have them be in contact with the title rep and come at it from a buyer representation angle, rather than having them rely on what the seller is provided, or a half-done title report you're waiting a couple weeks to get because of the way that the listing was taken. So I agree 100%. We need a full
Yeah.
title report, and not just the trio. We want the full, and it takes a few days to get that.
Yeah, that's not the trio that you get in, you know, within the hour. This is the one that takes some time to get. Yeah, and then I think just a reminder, you know, the burden of the legwork that gets done with the city planners, you know, calling the utility companies, let's get a bid for the tree removal. I mean, we can, just like with residents, you know, we can provide, you know, these are people that we maybe have used in the past or clients have used in the past. The burden of actually arranging for those bids and things like that, or sitting down with the city or contacting King County or Pierce County or whomever, really does fall on the buyer.
It does. And I just like to say that, reiterate it, is that we can be the source of the source, but not the source of the information. And I was in a situation recently, well, I am right now, where I got pushback because I put a 10-day feasibility review on a piece of land, and the agent came back to me. He was like, we don't do that. Your client knows whether you likes it or not. I'm like, well, this is what I do. And it was kind of interesting because he tried to bully me. And I was like, but
Yeah.
yeah, because it's not just buying the land. You're buying the land, but you're buying all the stuff that goes with the land.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the potential, really, right? And
Mhm.
I think that's something a lot of newer agents too think. They're like, oh, you know, 10-day inspection, you know, 10-day feasibility makes total sense. Some projects that might be fine. There are some land that you need more time. There's some cities that take longer to get responses for too. So it's not uncommon for feasibilities. I think the standard is actually, I think, a 30-day, isn't it, Rochelle? On the
I think the
feasibility.
default, I believe
Yeah.
so. But
Yeah.
yeah, it really depends. I don't like that there is even a default in there, because
Yeah.
every single city and county is going to run differently. For example, in Auburn, they do like a city planning meeting only once a month. So for them to get on, I mean, if you write a contract like right here on the first day of the month, you might have missed it. So you might need a 45-day, feasibility if you need to talk with the city and figure out what's possible with this particular parcel. You want to talk about utilities, Shannon, just kind of all that?
Yeah, with utilities, I think some one land is not the same as another. So, I mean, you'll find that there's utilities that will be connected, and then there's utilities that are available. So there's a difference in terms of, you know, when you're dealing with a custom home builder and things like that. Are things connected, or are they just at the street? So getting kind of an understanding of where the utilities are at is going to be important. If you're dealing with some of the properties that are going to be a septic property, the seller may have information on that. They may have done site work, prep work, you know, things like that. So getting an idea on where they're at with the design. I know some sellers, they've already done the septic design. They just didn't end up doing it. So what was approved in the past, maybe we could just reapply in that certain situation. So utilities can be a big deal. And that's one of the things that you can do during your feasibility as well.
Shannon, I'm going to say something. In my past experiences in working with land, vacant land, it's very helpful to get a good city planner. You may have to interview a couple of them, but find a good city planner, because quite often they can circumvent a lot of this information that you need to know.
That's
Yeah.
great.
Yeah, they totally
Great
can.
idea.
But your client should interview them, not you,
Yeah.
in my opinion.
Yeah, and then we've got one of our
Well,
agents is
now let me
asking.
just ask you,
Oh,
Virginia.
go for it.
The
Mhm.
client doesn't know what questions to ask. If you've got experience, would it not hurt to ask those questions if you've done it over and over again?
If you've done it over and over again, it doesn't hurt to ask those questions. But here's the thing, things change, rules change, and you provide those questions and you ask it, and then you give it to your client, and then you get in the situation, maybe they didn't hear you correctly, and they get information they think they get. No matter where your heart is or where your expertise is, it now is you are responsible for that. So
That's true.
So, I mean, I get what you're saying, and I like to provide as much help as possible for my clients.
So just give them a questionnaire to ask the city planner.
Yeah,
There you go.
exactly. And that's a great help. And then they can sit down with them.
Yeah, or you can go together, Patty.
Yeah.
Made the appointment so I could be well versed in what the county, because that information helps me to be able to pull more listings. I had a situation with the city of Pacific, right? And it's a
Oh, yeah.
small little town city. And it was interesting because a year ago they had these rules, but then new leadership, new planners, and then the information changed. So it was important for the builder and I to go down and actually work on that project together so that I was well versed in how to properly market the adjacent lots that were right next door to it. So things change. You just want to be very careful at if you were to get the information like Patty's suggesting, just make sure you email and you make it that this is not verified, buyer to verify what I came up with. Maybe some language like that would help. If you are going to gather some information, please double check my work. Please verify that this will work for your planning. Something like that would be very helpful to have that in writing.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And just a real quick, so we had a question that came through. Do we have a recommendation on land lending? In our area, that's very few.
There
that
is,
will
but there,
lend for land. So, I mean, we're talking about maybe one to three different lenders that I can think of that would be willing to do something like that. Timberland comes to mind. There's another one.
Washington Federal is another one.
Washington Federal would be the other one. Yep.
Washington, Ben Larson his company will do land, but it's 35% down. And according to Sean, Red Canoe Credit Union will also.
Yeah. So very, very limited lending. You're gonna have to do your shops on those. Most of the time it is cash.
Linda Kay, Edge, yep. I forgot she's got some product that she didn't have before. She's amazing. Linda Kay has got some great ideas for you. If you ever had a chance to work with her, she's awesome. Okay. And BECU, they just added land loan. So there'll be more that comes. Just realize that your client also should shop for the loan as much as they shop for the piece of land. If they're going to have to finance it. There's an offer sheet for big builders. So I want to kind of flip over to big builders. We're getting a lot of questions about this, especially with the compensation. How are builders paying? Now, there are builders out there that do not pay a buyer's agent. You would have to get paid directly from your buyer, and your buyer compensation or your buyer representation agreement would specify in those instances where you are going to be showing new construction or to builders that do not provide a buyer compensation on their sites. The number one thing that I hear has been like this for as long as I've been licensed, 25 years, is that when you are showing new construction, you cannot forget to register. They will not want to pay you a dime. In fact, they'll not want to pay you anything if you do not register, because the builder has to pay their site agents to show homes, to open up, to do market research, to do all the things that you would do as a retail agent. And so when the buyer comes because of the sign or because they're driving around the neighborhood and they don't have a buyer representative helping them, or the buyer agent forgot to register them, then the builder will essentially take your client. So to avoid that, what I would do is, my client was looking at homes, let's say in Puyallup. There's a lot of new construction that's going on in Puyallup. And so I would want to register them. Registration is not hard to do with most of these builders. You could go onto their websites, or you could call their home site and register them on the phone. It doesn't have to be in person. Most of the builders will work that way. They'll ask for your client's name, their phone number, their email address, and then they will assign you to be their buyer's rep. So if they did come over to look at the home on a weekend, for example, when you're showing some other people homes, then you would get credit for this, for that sale. Now, depending on how they're structured, they might have, they don't typically, I mean, depends on what they're doing. There's no typical way of doing it. But the one thing you want to do is verify when you write their offer, you will have an offer sheet. Most of the big builders have something like we see here on the screen. This is a one-sheeter. And that one sheeter is going to, you're going to provide all that information. A lot of it will carry over from, like, say, the registration. But that box that's right below, well, thanks, Shannon, it will have a place where you can fill in how do you want the offer structured. This is what you would do. You would fill this all in for the buyer because you're representing the buyer in this instance. And you would indicate the price they want to offer, when they want to close, whether they're a new, whether they have a home to sell, because they have a different type of clause that they would usually put into their contract. If there's appliances or closing costs, or if they're doing some sort of special interest rate, in this case, there's a special interest rate promotion that they're offering. Or if you're going to want to make sure that they're paying a certain amount of your buyer compensation, that is the place. Make sure that it gets into your offer letter, or in this case, it's called like a letter of intent. In commercial, we do letter of intents all the time. Essentially, that's what the builders or the large builders have decided to do, is put a letter of intent together and then go ahead and send this on over to the site agent, who will then prepare the documents, have the builder essentially sign off on the contract, and then they would meet with the homeowner, the buyer, the future homeowner, to get the signatures on the contract. Richmond American, for example, has a 150-page document, no joke. The builder will control the document. You, as the buyer's agent, are not able to give legal advice when it comes to the forms. However, you can go ahead and put the terms that would be most favorable to your buyer on this offer sheet. So take your time with the offer sheet. If you have any question at all when you're trying to get this over to the new construction site, send me a text, contact Virginia, contact me, Shannon, or Candace, because we have seen a lot more than you have when it comes to these builders. Some builders are going to be it's too bad, so sad, you didn't write it up. You don't get paid. Others are going to be like a big builder is going to be definitely wanting to make sure they cross their T's and dot their I's, because they don't want a bad reputation. So they will honor the buyer agency agreements. DR Horton specifically will. But that doesn't mean that you're going to be bumped at a position. If you just sent this in today, this 1.299 property, there was actually another buyer who was also interested in this. And so we actually had to throw in an escalation. So that's where you would do it. You would do it right here on the offer sheet. We happened to get this one. I will tell you, we were fortunate to get it, but there was essentially there's a shortage of inventory in that particular price point and in that area. And there was another buyer that was going to also put an offer sheet like this together. And in order for them to get it, they did have to pay more. They couldn't ask for concessions. And the margins typically on new construction, I will say, the margins are not typically very big. I mean, it's not like the builder is making a killing on these properties. Most of the builders will make the money on their upgrades, or on when they purchased the lot, they were able to obtain a sizable discount because of how they purchased the lots, but they don't make this massive amount of money. And if your client asked for, say, on this one, they asked for 5% off, the builder would probably say, no way, we'll go with another person that's willing to pay the full asking price. You may be able to negotiate concessions or interest rate buy downs, maybe appliances, or if it doesn't have landscaping and say other build sites do, you might be able to negotiate for some of those things that the builder can control a little bit better. But as far as a discount on the house, most builders do not do that. I will just say that up front. I've done enough new construction and helped a lot of you guys win. Disclosures, you are required, every builder, whether it be new, builder's been around a long time, small, large, mid-size, it does not matter. They are not exempt from Form 17. They have a partial exemption. They must fill out the environmental section and it has to be filled out entirely. It does not have to be on the 6-page document. Most of the builders, large builders, will take this little section and actually put that into their purchase and sale agreement that they have vetted with their attorney. So it's got to be in there. We do, as a company, scroll through the document. Again, we cannot advise on how the structure of the document is written. Is it more for the builder? Is it more for the buyer? I will say on this call, yes, it's much more worded for the builder or the developer than it is for that buyer. So if your buyer is asking you a lot of questions about the structure of the document, what legally you, unfortunately, because it's not a Washington state approved form, you're not able to give them advice. However, on the environmental, you can suggest that they contact their attorney if they had fill material or they had, you know, something like that, that they needed some more information on. The Form 17 is a Washington state approved document, but the builder document has been designed and organized by the builder's attorney most of the time. So if you don't have a builder's addendum, then you will be using a form on the Northwest MLS, most likely if it's Washington State. And there are a pre-sale addendum and a pre-sale. So it does kind of give a builder, a small or mid-sized builder, a template to work within. And that becomes a little bit more of a document you can work with and negotiate from if the builder is not using their own legal documents. That might help some of you who are trying to get a deal. Is you might look for a smaller or mid-sized builder and use the Northwest MLS docs rather than the legal documents that they're provided by their attorney. Okay, closing costs and upgrades. Shannon, do you want to open it up? Maybe Virginia, we can do a rapid fire here.
So you guys want me, so closing
Yeah.
costs and upgrades? Closing
Yeah, what's-
costs, go ahead. What's the
No,
question?
go ahead. What's the
specifically?
question is like, okay, so I need closing costs, Virginia, rapid fire. It's a
Rapid
new
fire,
home.
you know what? Most likely the lender will ask you to use their preferred lender, the builder will most likely have a preferred lender and they are offering some kind of incentive. Right now, most of them are. And your closing costs will be covered on that. And some of the closing costs or the credits back you can use for some upgrades. Upgrades are 50% down on all upgrades up front before you can even get them ordered.
Yeah. And they usually they make you write a check out, right? I mean,
Yeah,
it's,
yeah.
yeah, it's like a real deal. They don't order anything until
Without a
the client.
50% down payment.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's been like that for a very long time, even when I bought my new constructed house. Let's go to the next one. So I would say most builders at this point have a preferred lender in escrow. Have you ever, I know for a fact, I've never been able to negotiate a different title in escrow. I've always had to use the builders in my entire career. But
never
as far
been
as a
able-
lender,
I've never been able to negotiate a different escrow, but with the preferred lender, depends on what their inventory is sitting like. If they are heavy in inventory and they need to get some sold, as long as their preferred lender puts their star of approval on it, I have gotten a different lender.
mhm.
But if they are rocking and rolling, they're going to hold fast to it.
Okay, I don't think it hurts. So if you want my philosophy on whether to use the builder's preferred lender, I'd say go ahead, make application with the preferred lender at the build site or the new construction. They've already kind of grabbed all of the information from the builder, the tax information, how they're going to structure all of that, and they may be able to save your client money. But then in the same vein, have your preferred lender, whoever you use, also run your client and see if even with say they offer a $5,000 lender credit, it may not be as good of a deal. Your lender, maybe BECU, maybe a different bank that they bank with, maybe it's your preferred lender, can actually do just as good, maybe even better, and then still close on time. The builder or the developer is wanting to make sure that the deal closes on time. That's why they have the preferred lender, is they have had too many deals fall out. And that's when they started saying, well, what if we have a preferred lender that will help control the loss of the failures, because the lender that they're using has, you know, has skin in the game, has marketing, has obviously access to their build site, and they can keep better control of the process. That's what I've heard from builders and developers and why they have a preferred lender. They don't like the fallout. They want those deals to close.
And buyer beware, if for whatever reason you use your own lender and then you switch back to the builder's lender and you were doing a pre-sale, you still have to have your lending locked in place. Most of the time it's 30 days, and you pass that 30 days, you lose your earnest money. So that's something to be aware of. Watch your dates.
Good tips. I got a couple more tips and then I'll let you guys go. I know we're a little bit over, but that's okay. I want to record this. We don't talk about new construction very much. I think it's been a year since we talked about new homes. And as we go into the holidays, new homes are very warm and very comforting, and there's not a lot of repairs. I mean, it's very refreshing to walk in. So speaking of repairs, walkthrough and inspection. So Virginia, when you are advising agents, the builder is going to essentially not have a 35 or a 35. So what if they walk through and the buyer, do they get an inspection though? Do they hire an inspector?
You can hire an inspector, and I do advise my clients to do so, but a builder does have their own walkthrough, and they will do what's called a blue tape kind of walkthrough, where if you point out anything, they will pop it with blue tape, and those are things that will, like a punch list, will get fixed, apparently, and then you can have a walkthrough to make sure those happen. A lot of the times, builders will not allow their agents to be there with them during this time, and they isolate the clients from their agent, so the builder has more control. So, just be aware, have conversations. If they want an inspection, there are timeframes when they can order the inspection, and you just need to read the contract.
Yeah, the contract's going to specify how the process of the inspection is going to happen. Each builder is different in how they handle it, but they don't let you, like the 35, let you walk away for any reason. So once you've put your money up, you got your financing contingency or what have you, then your inspection is really just to make sure that the house is structurally sound and it passes. Builders are not going to want you to do your own independent inspection. I would advise that you do it and have it done before you close, just for their own knowledge. And I would specialize or call somebody that specializes in new construction inspections. And that way it will take the burden off of you and you'll have a full report. And there usually is something that they're going to find, whether it be drainage, roofing, attic, crawl space. Most of the time there's pretty substantial things that will come up that maybe their subs didn't catch. And then the builder is required to fix it, make sure it's standard. So if you wait and do not do that, then I would recommend that the client, they can do an inspection after close, but make sure that they do it before their warranty is up. So there's two kind of ways you could do that. You could do it before you close, which I recommend the most, or wait until, they could just rely on what the builder is telling them. But again, the builder could be, not watching their subs very well. And then you have to basically take it up with them during your 1-year warranty. You're going to get less people wanting to honor their warranty rather than closing escrow and fixing some of these sizable things. I had one, Virginia, that the insulation was installed backwards, the entire thing, right? And it's just like, stuff like that happens. So they took an extra week. We had to extend the closing. That was an extension the builder had to do. It was on because of their fault, we had to pay the $100 late fee that was in the contract for being late. And they had to rerun the entire sub through the insulation. And we got a good laugh, but little things like that happen. I mean, we're human, so things like that would not have been caught. And then what could have happened during that entire year? It could have had mold situation, moisture issues, could be a lot harder. So it was easier to deal with that before close of escrow. So
we just had gutters missing just recently on one that closed. Before we closed, all the gutters were missing. It's just, you remember that the site, there's a site manager, but he's overseeing lots of properties, and they're subs, and they come in on the weekends. Sometimes they check off they've done it, but nobody's really checked their work.
Yeah. So that inspector that's hired by the buyer would essentially be that other set of eyes, a neutral third party that will then provide kind of a stamp that, hey, I work for the buyer. And it doesn't cost, it's a few $100s, but it's well worth it to make sure that the builder is doing their job. So if you have not considered that, you might want to get a new construction builder. I have a couple names. Virginia probably does too. They're not my typical go-to structural inspector. They are people that are well-versed in working with these builders. And it might cost them a few $100s more, but it's a much better inspection that they can have done. Any other questions that you guys have? Shannon? Any questions that came through the chat that we need to take care of?
No, but thanks, Abby. She's saying when she hires an inspector, she requests an inspector experience with new construction, since they'll know certain things to look for that tend to be a trend with certain builders. And yeah, that's a good tip. Katie had a question. If the builder does not allow agents there for their walkthrough, what should we advise buyers to look for?
I advise buyers never to allow the builder's representative to rush them. look for things that are structural, hookups that don't look right. Make sure the oven and all that turns on. They like to talk fast and rush you through the process. Ask them to slow down and take their time.
Yeah. And a good walkthrough is not going to be the 15 minutes. It's going to be much more thorough. Yeah. So if you've got somebody rushing you through, you definitely probably want to hire an inspector to come through and just do one more check. And most of the contracts allow for that. They allow for an inspector. You just have to get permission and access, and you got to follow the rules. But they do allow for it. Every builder I work with allows for it. They don't like it, but
No, they don't like it.
but your buyer is certainly entitled to that.
They are.
Okay. Anything else, Shannon? Are we good?
I had one last question. They were saying, they said, what if something the builder promised to do was not done prior to closing? They promised to do it after the close of escrow. What would we do in that scenario?
And
And
it
this
goes
is,
right to the customer service department. You are acting as a customer service representative as well. Your duties cease the moment it closes. So then you turn into a customer service rep. So think about that. It becomes a lot tougher to make the builder fix something once you've closed escrow. And if they promise to do something, it's in writing, then you'll need to take that piece of paper or that email where they said they were going to do something and submit that to the warranty department or the customer service department of that respective builder. If at that point they still will not do something, which has happened in the past, then again, it would be a small claims court, or it'd be going legal, having an attorney that does new construction represent your client. And we are hands off. That's where the buyer would need to contact an attorney to help them with that matter.
yeah, and I think the builder doesn't necessarily have their own builder warranty, which most do. Having at least some sort of home warranty on that would be a good idea. Patty Anderson had another comment. You can get builders to also take care of details like tagging finish flaws.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's good.
Yeah.
And those walkthrough, I showed up with blue tape on both arms, Shannon, back in the day, and now they don't like that. They have their own blue. I don't think they changed the colors, Virginia. Maybe they don't do blue tape anymore. They've changed their color
Sound belt does
system.
sound belt
does
does
blue.
tape. But they
Yeah.
don't allow you 10 feet near the walkthrough with the buyer.
Yeah. They want to keep us away. I
Yeah.
know.
Didn't work.
Well,
for me
hopefully
for a
this was
while.
helpful. Shannon, anything else? Are we good?
Nope, that's all the questions I think we had today. So thanks, you guys.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Have a good evening. We'll talk to you next Monday.